The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation will come to order. We're here this morning to talk about developing next-generation technology for innovation. We're joined by a distinguished panel of manufacturers and people who use this product as a critical part of our supply chain, and we welcome all of them who are with us today. The semiconductor industry is definitely a uniquely American story. It has shown the importance of innovation and building in the United States. The semiconductors underpin nearly every aspect of our national and economic security, and yet we are short on the amount of advanced logic chips building at scale here in the United States of America. That has to change.
Although semiconductors have become vastly more important to global commerce, the United States has for decades neglected the industry. America's share of global semiconductor manufacturing has fallen from nearly 40% in 1990 to about 12% today. Foreign governments, including China, seized on the lack of U.S. leadership in this area, and as a result, we are now entirely dependent on foreign production of the most cutting-edge chip technology.
Every aspect of human existence is becoming digital, and everything digital runs on semiconductors. We provided you samples of some show and tell, right? Our most advanced high-performance computing components, the latest generation of 7-nanometer server and client products, and the first ever samples of our 4-nanometer next-generation client product as well. This is what we're talking about today, the most advanced components on Earth. Semiconductors are the foundation for technologies, including artificial intelligence, 5G, autonomous vehicles, and IoT. Our economic and national security are dependent on semiconductors.
Escalating geopolitical risks have highlighted the urgency to reconcile and pass an innovation and competition bill that includes full funding for the CHIPS Act and the Investment Tax Credit, part of the Bipartisan FABS Act. These two incentives together would invigorate domestic manufacturing in the semiconductor industry and allow companies to invest with confidence for the future. Together, these developments will kickstart investment in workforce development, R&D, innovation, and expansion of manufacturing in the near term.
I'd like to ask each of the semiconductor manufacturer witnesses to briefly describe your spending plans for the next few years and explain how you envision CHIPS funding potentially fitting into them. And if I could start with Intel, Mr. Gelsinger.
Thank you. I came to the role as CEO slightly over a year ago. I ceased our buyback policy immediately upon my arrival. I laid out to Wall Street a radical increase in our capital expenditures, more than doubling them, taking the free cash flow of Intel negative for the first time in over 3 decades, reducing our profitability by 600 basis points, more than doubling our long-term capital investments, and indicating to the street that I expected to see that level only increase for the rest of the decade. This is the largest capital build-out probably done by any company in any industry in history. The majority of that will land on American soil. But I do not believe that's enough, and I can't do it myself. The CHIPS Act is intended, from my perspective, to enable me to go bigger and faster than the bold commitments that we have already made that have reached very negative response from Wall Street. We want to do more and faster. This is all about restoring U.S. competitive, bringing back this mantle from Asia on a critical industry, not only for our economy, but also our national security. We're all in.
Thank you. Mr. Murata.
Senator Baldwin, as I highlighted earlier, Micron is the only company in the US that manufactures semiconductor memory and storage. And semiconductor memory and storage represents nearly 60% of the worldwide wafer production. And we are the only company here manufacturing and developing leading-edge technologies. Today, we are the global leader in technology for DRAM and NAND ahead of all other global competitors in developing that technology and putting it into production. We have done so by making billions and billions and tens of billions, more than that, investments over the course of last few years in leading-edge R&D and investments in manufacturing. We'll always prioritize our investments in R&D and manufacturing to be able to secure leadership for Micron in semiconductor memory technology and to be able to meet the growing needs in this world of data economy for more data solutions, which we make, memory and storage solutions. So that will always be our highest priority. As part of that, we have announced in October of last year that over the decade, we will be investing more than $150 billion in leading-edge R&D and manufacturing. So that is the priority, to continue to drive innovation, to continue to invest in R&D, to continue to support the manufacturing. That's our plan, and that's our focus.
And Mr. Archer.
Yes, so Senator Baldwin, we manufacture the machines that are used to make the chips. And so our priorities for the future are the same as they've been the last couple of years, which is to expand our capacity. Nearly 70% of our manufacturing capacity is in the U.S. We spend about 90% of our R&D in the U.S. Last year was of $1.5 billion. Our priorities for the future are just to continue to invest to accelerate innovation in support of the domestic and global semiconductor manufacturing industry in order to try to alleviate many of the global shortages that we've seen in chips that are affecting so many different industries. And so we're going to just continue to invest to maintain our leadership in this space.
What is the current state of the semiconductor industry with regards to China, and where do you see the industry's future in China? Mr. Gelsinger.
Yeah. China has emphasized the development of this sector on Chinese soil very significantly. It's been part of every 5-year plan in China for the last 2.5 decades of this priority area. And they have made substantial progress in building up their semiconductor industry. However, given our export license control matters, they're significantly behind. And their position is largely in older nodes and older industries, not on leading edge technologies, where U.S. and European capabilities are still far more advanced and other Asian countries are advanced. And thus, we believe that such practices for the future are important to continue the leadership that we have, to be very, very thoughtful about being able to sell products there so that we're maximizing the position of our product revenue, but to continue to keep a substantial technology leadership for our equipment suppliers as well as our chip suppliers to be able to have revenues there. It's the largest chip market in the world in China. So we need to be able to participate to become the largest companies in the world, even as we be very careful to protect our intellectual property and leadership position.
Sure. Mr. Horta, do you have anything to add, sir?
I would just add that as China is one of the large markets, it is a large market not only due to Chinese companies using semiconductor products, but it is a large market due to many global businesses operating there and manufacturers such as Micron supplying product to them in China as well. So the China market does help provide scale that is important for semiconductor industry. The benefit of scale ultimately goes into investments in R&D. I would also add, as has been highlighted here earlier as well, that China certainly is very much recognizing the importance of semiconductors, certainly recognizes the importance of memory semiconductors, which Micron is the only company in the US making those, and is investing more than $100 billion supporting their semiconductor industry. And hence, it is extremely important that US does play catch-up with CHIPS Act, with investment tax credits, and timing is of the essence. Other countries are moving forward. We need to catch up in this area to get a level playing field. And as part of level playing field, of course, other aspects of free market access, fair trade policies, protection of intellectual property, these are all aspects that are clearly important as well.
Which is why we're advocating for this USICA legislation. So thank you for affirming that.
This all exists here in the United States, and you have those closer relationships. and the whole supply chain is talking to each other, and they're talking about what their needs are, and they're talking about the next generation, I guarantee you the United States will do the right things to help catch up on this shortage and lead the way in next generation technology. You heard from many of my colleagues who had various takes on this issue. You heard from Senator Rosen about her interest in the broadband system. I too have a very keen interest in our grid and electrification and what we're going to do to, we're not going to make any of the transformation without our grid providing more of the communication system. And so there's just so many opportunities before us. So I also want to thank you, particularly you, Mr. Gelsinger, but obviously our other witnesses. Look, we want to see these companies driven by good engineering. It's called the information age for a reason. That means that the opportunities are there, but we need the engineers. So I actually applaud some of the financial decisions you've been making because it's being based on good engineering. And I guarantee you in the end, that is what is going to be rewarded by American investment is solid, good engineering. We've led in this area in the past. We want to lead again. We appreciate what that'll do for us, for innovation, and for jobs in the United States of America. So thank you all very much for being here. The hearing will be open in the record for 2 more weeks. Senators will have until Wednesday, April 6th at noon to submit questions for the record. Witnesses will have 2 weeks to respond to those questions, and we appreciate your diligence on that. But that concludes today's hearing. We're adjourned.